when you look at each philosophy have something called axioms. Axioms are the principles that those that follow that philosophy believe. It doesn't matter why they believe them.
Our next speaker is Jordi Casamitjana, a vegan zoologist and a long-time animal rights activist who has worked as an investigator, consultant, and campaigner for many animal protection groups. He's also known for winning a landmark case in the UK to secure protection for discrimination against ethical vegans. In his presentation, Jordi will explore the connections and the differences between the veganism movement and the animal rights movement and what this means for their future. Please help me to welcome Jordi Casamitjana.
Thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me to come here and listen to my talk. In this talk, I'm going to try to answer this question, whether the animal rights movement and the veganism movement are the same. And of course, everything I'm going to be saying here will be my opinion, because who knows? Only history will tell us. But where my opinion comes from? Well, I've been vegan for 23 years now. I have been an animal rights person for over 30 years. I have been dealing with non-human animals for over 40 years. I have been dealing with human animals for over 60 years. And all that, plus a book I wrote, is called Ethical Vegan, A Personal and Political Journey to Change the World, has given me the audacity to answer this question in front of an audience of people I don't know, but also give me some experience that perhaps you might find useful. So this is going to be my talk, essentially, these 4 parts. First, I'm going to look at the philosophical difference between the two, whether they are different, they are the same. Then the sociological difference, then the historical difference, very brief history of both. And finally, what's the current situation? But this is the issue that we're dealing here. This is the issue that both of them deal with. And this image is probably the most important thing of my talk. So if you forget everything, try to remember that image, because that's the one that explains everything. And this is just a person with a gun, a human with a gun, trying to shoot a deer that didn't want that and didn't expect that and didn't understand that. And that represents humans interacting with non-human animals in a way that is negative to them. But it could be just anything. It could be abattoir worker trying to kill a pig, or somebody in a temple trying to have a ritual and kill a goat, or somebody trying to steal the milk. It doesn't matter. It's always a human doing something to an animal that doesn't want it to be done. So that's the issue. The difference what I found between the veganism philosophy and the animal rights philosophy is the perspective in which that issue is looked at. Veganism really looks at the issue from the perspective of the human. In a way, probably that's how it would look like. So it still sees the bigger picture, it still sees both, but the human is in the front, the human is occupying most of the frame of attention of the veganism. The details are closer, the animal in the background is a bit more further away and diffuse, while animal rights is looking at it from the non-human animal perspective. So it will look like that. So the deer would be the one that is closer and the one that you pay more attention, know more about it, and human becomes in the background. What has happened over the years when these two philosophies have been developing is there's been a tendency to only look at one side of the picture, knowing that the other part is there, but not really paying too much attention. And veganism has been really focusing a lot on the human dimension of this issue, and animal rights on the non-human animal dimension of this issue, as like a separation of the two. And that might explain why they might have become slightly different movements and philosophies, and that's what we're going to explore now, whether that's the case. So as I said, veganism focus more on the human part of it, and in that images could be any of these, the vivisectors, the scientists, the exploiters, the people that tame animals for circuses, etc. And animal rights just focus more on the animals, the dogs, the horses, the bulls, the lions, wild animals, whatever they are. Philosophically, now we're going into the philosophy element, they're both philosophical beliefs. They're all philosophies. They all deal with an understanding of reality, but they are non-religious philosophical belief. Philosophical belief is a term that simply means a conviction. So people that follow these philosophies are convinced that something is true. And if you have a religious conviction or religious belief, you're convinced because of faith or a priest told you so, or as scriptures. If you have a non-religious philosophical belief, is because of logic, common sense, evidence, etc. But the end result is the same. You're convinced about something. They're both the same in this regard. And they're all philosophies for people that care about non-human animals. Those that follow these philosophies care about non-human animals. But veganism, and that side here, as I said, focus more on humans because that's the one in the front of that picture from that angle that the veganism looks at it. And therefore, the philosophical discipline that deals with veganism is ethics. It's an ethical type of philosophy. And ethics is the disciplines that look for what's right and what's wrong. And it tells people, do this, which is right, and don't do that, that is wrong. And this is what veganism has been doing. And what is the main principle that veganism relies on? There are several, but the main principle, happily, there is a single word that summarizes the principle, which is ahimsa, which is a Sanskrit word, very old, for millennia ago, which means do no harm or non-violence. If you look at it as a noun, then it's non-violence. If you look at it as a verb, then do no harm. It's an imperative verb, do no harm, because it's ethics. Remember, ethics is all about telling people what's right or what's wrong, do this or don't do that. What, in this case, do no harm. Harm to whom? Well, that's what has changed in the evolution of the philosophy. Who are the ones who should not harm? Only humans or the animals or the primates? That has changed, but this initial idea of not harming, and remember, harming is not the same of suffering. Veganism is not about reducing suffering. It's about stopping harming non-human animals being harmed by humans. So that's the main principle of veganism. So essentially is looking at a bullfight and say, don't harm the bull. Look at a priest, don't execute an animal. Looking at a lion tamer, don't harm the lion by taming it, etc. Animal rights, on the other side, is, as I said earlier, focusing more on non-human animals. But the philosophy disciplines are slightly different, and precisely because of that. They're kind of two, epistemology and axiology. Epistemology is the part of philosophy that deals with knowledge, how we know things, how others know things, what are things that we understand. And axiology is the part of philosophy that deals with value, how we value things, which value we give to everything. And you think about it, that's what animal rights does. Epistemology basically will look at the animal, you think, are they sentient, are they not sentient? Do they have feelings? Do they not have feelings? How do I know that we're different? How do I know that they are the same? It's all about how do we know? How do they know? It's all about that. But then also the axiology, the value, how we value them. What does it matter? Does it matter that they speak? Does it matter that they suffer? And are they all valued the same? Are some animals valued differently? So it's a slightly different philosophical approach. And the main principle is that all non-human animals have fundamental rights because they have an intrinsic moral worth. So the moral worth is the axiology part of it that tells, yeah, we see them all and you see them worth it. So that's why, and it's intrinsic, it's not up to us to decide how worth they are, they have it. And these all non-human animals have that fundamental rights, it's this word of rights. So there's, you see, they start to see some of the difference of approach because of the angle of approaching it makes slightly different philosophies. So when you look at each philosophy have something called axioms. Axioms are the principles that those that follow that philosophy believe. It doesn't matter why they believe them, but they believe them. Doesn't matter if they have evidence or not, they believe them. And there are many philosophies, all philosophy has several axioms, religious too. And I identify 5 main axioms for veganism. I'm not going to go in details of them because we won't have time, but I just mention it very quickly. The first I mentioned already, ahimsa, do no harm, is the most important one. The try not to harm anyone is the moral baseline. The second is animal sentience. all members of the animal kingdom should be considered sentient beings, not just the ones we know, even the ones we haven't discovered yet. And exploitation is the third. All exploitation sentient beings harms them. As you can see with my chart, you can summarize really veganism with that sentence: we are against animal exploitation. And why? Because it harms them, so affects the principle number one. And number four, anti-speciesism. Not discriminating against anyone is the right ethical way. We should not treat some animals different than others because they belong to a different group. And the last one, this word is often not very known, vicariousness. This is the one, if you think about it, we all believe in this, even if we never thought about that, is that indirect harm to a sentient being caused by another person is still harm we try to avoid. So it's not just the harm we do, it's the harm that other people do. It doesn't need to be direct harm, killing something. It might be indirect because they buy something that somebody else killed. So this indirectness is what is called vicarious. This is a legal term. Sometimes so you might be accused of a vicarious crime if you're the owner of a business and one of your employees broke the law, but because you're indirect connected with that employee, you're vicariously guilty too. That's where the word comes from. While animal rights have slightly different axioms, sometimes they are really quite the same, but worded differently because the emphasis is different. Sometimes they're different. The first one we already seen, all animals, non-human animals, have fundamental moral rights because they are sentient beings with intrinsic moral worth. This sentient beings point here is the same than in the past, the second in veganism that says all animals are sentient beings, so we agree in there. The second is a very important one for animal rights, very specific. All individual non-human animals are persons who matter as much as the species they belong to. Conservation cares about species, animal rights cares about the individuals. And we treat them as persons, which is a legal term, which essentially means we don't accept their property or commodities. They are as persons as we are. Remember, this is all about who they are, all this epistemological element is, are they like us? Are we persons? Are they persons too? And the other three are the life, autonomy, and liberty. This is some of the rights. But the autonomy that says animal kingdom have the right of body autonomy and should not be exploited. You see, the canon is the same principle than veganism says all exploitation is wrong. So you see, some of them are quite the same. Some of them are unique. Some of them are worded differently. But it explains that, it's the same subject, but it explains some of the differences. Let's move at the social movements, because these are the philosophies. Because each of these philosophies generated a social movement. Why? Because they realized that there was an injustice, both of them. So they all social movements which sprang from the recognition of one injustice, the way that humans deal with non-human animals. But which injustice, how this is interpreted, that is what has changed. But any movement means, yes, I see an injustice, I want to change this, I'm going to mobilize the world, hence the word social, to change it. It's always a recognition of injustice and an attempt to change it. But what to change or how to change it, which injustice it is, this is what changes. So animal rights, let's look at the justice, what they consider injustice. Animal rights says injustice because non-human animals have an intrinsic right that more humans violate. Violating human rights, that's unjust. That's why it's injustice. While veganism says injustice because people do not follow ahimsa and may act in the way that they behave, that they harm animals. So they breach ahimsa, they harm animals. How do they want to change the world? It's slightly different because animal rights want to change the world first through the legal system, because that's where the word rights come. Let's make the moral rights, they are intrinsic, make them legal rights. Ban these, stop that, create laws that prevent things to happen. And then from there, change the world systemically. Start with laws and bans and things and move to systemic. While veganism, it changed through behavior, asking people, remember it's ethics, it's telling people what to do. So asking people change their behavior, become vegan, don't consume this, don't buy that. And then through that change of behavior, eventually will be a systemic change, because among those changes, there will be decision makers that are able to change laws and things like that. So it's slightly different. The word has created a slightly different movement too. Animal rights is more of a justice movement aimed to what? To animal liberation, a very specific thing, non-human animals being liberated. While the veganism movement aims bigger, has a bigger picture, aims to the vegan world. It's a transformative socio-political movement aiming to the vegan world where everything is changed, the politics, the systems, everything, the way we deal with Amazon, the way we deal with each other. And that's quite significant, because if you achieve the vegan world, you already achieve animal liberation, but the other way is not true. So part of the vegan world will be animal liberation, but if you might achieve animal liberation, but still you have a lot of issues with being humans and the environment, then you haven't really achieved the same goal. So that's why veganism actually aims to be ambitious, more ambitious for this regard. And it's understandable because they've been longer. It's a longer historically movement being around. So let's move then to the history, very briefly. So the history of the birth of veganism, the word of ahimsa is useful because then we know where things started. That word has been already circulating millennium before the Common Era. One of the most known people using it was Mahavira, the 24th teacher of the Jain religion. That was 200 or 300 years before the Common Era. They were already using this word. Of course, it was happening in India, what we call today India, but simultaneously in other parts of the world, the same idea sprung. So it's not that the whole thing started in one place. Spontaneity started in many other places. In Europe, in Greece, Pythagoras started to develop similar ideas, telling people not to eat meat, not to do this because of that or that. In the Middle East, we have the Essenes. There was a sect of Jews, and that's also about all these three about the same amount of time, contemporaries to each other. The Essenes were a Jewish sect that started to say we should not consume animals, we should not eat meat, blah, blah, blah. From the Essenes, there will be a group called the Nazarenes. If you've seen the documentary Christspiracy, that says possibly Jesus Christ was a Nazarene and perhaps was a vegetarian from birth because the Nazarenes were vegetarian. Well, the Nazarenes probably came from the Essenes. And after them, after the death of Jesus Christ, there were other groups that were also Christians and vegetarians, like Ebionites, the Cathars, the Bohemians. Through the history, there's been a lot of that. But then in the East as well, Lao Tzu created Taoism that has these ideas of doing no harm as well. So you see independently in different parts of the world. After, centuries later, we have people like Plutarch that started to spell it more clearly in concerns of non-human animals, because at the beginning, many were just applying it to humans, do no harm to humans, not thinking beyond that. But then Plutarch started to say, well, there's no reason to stop there, and started to find advantages of looking beyond that. And in the middle of the 11th century, in what we now consider Syria, there was Abu al-Mari, a poet that was in the golden age of Islam, but he wasn't religious. He was a vegan like you and I, so 100% vegan in all respects. No leather, no honey, no milk, nothing. And he was campaigning and like we do. There were already vegans, 100% vegans, doing the vegan thing in the middle of the Middle Ages. But he was still quite always linked to religion in a way or another. I mean, although he wasn't religion, but other groups were, until the creation in 1847 of the Vegetarian Society. And Joseph Brotherton was the first chair of that society. It was an attempt to secularize what was already going on, and just to make it more international, not linked to any culture or religion. But they did it. They didn't do it completely, because they were vegetarians, they did consume some animals and milk and honey, and they didn't really secularize it completely, because many of the people that created the Vegetarian Society were religious themselves. He was a Reverend Joseph Brotherton, so they were attempting to make it secular, but not quite there. It was not until 1944 that the group from the Vegetarian Society split, among them Donald Watson and others, and created the Vegan Society in 1944 and created the word vegan. And they stopped having the consumption of honey and milk and eggs and things like that. So that process was finally defined properly. The idea was developing for a long time, but only until the Vegan Society created the word, it became a truly international movement. To that point, it was a philosophy, but now it became a truly international movement. What about animal rights? What's the history of that? Well, it's all linked to the history of rights. The history of rights, difficult to know exactly when that concept began, but we can just say that in the middle of the Middle Ages, when the Magna Carta was created, was the first idea that people have about these rights. Magna Carta was this document when the kings that had all and the monarchs that had all the power in the world started to give some right to some people, the barons, some rich people. And that, of course, that kept moving in the human rights side. We have the French Revolution, the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights of the United States, and things like that. In the human rights, starting to slowly. Then where did the non-human rights started? Well, John Locke, and that was in the Renaissance, was the one that started to say, well, if we have rights for humans, we should have possibly rights for animals. He's the one that started to say animals do have feelings like us. Up to that point, people didn't believe. Another person from the Renaissance, Descartes, the one that said, I think, therefore I am, again, epistemological stuff. Then he said, animals are machines. They don't have feelings at all. Pierre Gassendi, contemporary of him, said, no, you're completely wrong. And John Locke took it and said, yeah, I think you're right. They have feelings. But was Margaret Cavendish around the same time that really make a big leap that had not done before? She's the one that challenged human exceptionality. She said, animals are not here for us. And we say that all the time in our demonstrations. She was the first one that said that. She was the first one that said humans are not different than them. We are the same thing. So that started to understand the bigger picture of who are the animals. A century later, Jeremy Bentham is the one that said, okay, we're trying to figure out how we value them. So and he said, it's not about whether they speak or whether they think. It's about whether they suffer. He's the one that put the suffering into the equation. And people say, quite right. From there, two branches develop. One is the animal rights ones we're developing here. The other is the animal welfare philosophy that started to say, okay, if this is suffering, let's start working to reduce suffering. While the animal rights was, no, it's not about reduce suffering, it's about stopping completely the suffering. A century later, Henry Stephen Sword is the one that really put it into words. He said, yeah, we're going to call this animal rights, and wrote a book calling about the animal rights. Essentially said, if they are human rights, animals should have human rights, animal rights too, and they because they value, because they feel, because they speak, and all these things. In the human rights side, we have to wait until 1948 to have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Up to that point, it was all philosophy. Now we have laws that become something solid. And the animal rights people start to say, okay, let's get the same thing. Let's get the Universal Declaration of Animal Rights or non-human animal rights. But that never materialized. And that's when animal rights went into the fringes. Up to that point was about all making laws and creating rights, and because we could not achieve the international thing, it started to go into the fringes. There were still philosophers like Tom Regan that were still promulgating the whole thing from a philosophical point of view. But often what it did, animal rights, is started to get into single issue campaigning, because if they couldn't get the bigger picture of the Universal Declaration of Non-Human Animal Rights, then they could at least get some bans here, some bans there. And there was the anti-vivisection movement created in 19th century, the anti-hunting movement, the anti-bullfighting movement, the anti-captivity movement. So all these subdivisions of movement that made the goals easier to achieve, because the ambitions of change in the law was more difficult than changing people's behavior. What's the situation closer? Well, so in the 70s and 15, 16, 70s, the whole two movements were running parallel. You could be in one, you could be in the other. Sometimes they were not together. But then in 1977, that's when Animal Rights was created in the UK. That was an organization that had both philosophies. People started to say, well, this thing is an advantage, actually, to have both, not just one or the other. Then Peter, in 1980, did the same, an organization that was both. And that fact started to make them getting closer. People started to realize if they had both, there are some advantages. And gradually, the philosophies started to get closer. In the late 90s, this is when I started the business. So I can tell this story because I was here. They were quite apart. I remember how apart they were. I was there. And then they started, because we grew, because we getting together make that grew, then people started to realize, okay, there might be different types of animal rights. And then the deontological ethics and utilitarian ethics start to develop, and animal welfare start to mess with the picture as well. But generally speaking, when people adopting both, they started to get together. And we have, in the 2020, so close that people didn't even notice the difference. You will join the movement and think that you're joining one, and you actually might be joining two. So what's the situation right now? This is how we are. So we are overlapping so much that is almost all green, is almost all both. But there is still animal rights people in the yellow that are not vegan, and there's still vegan people in the blue that they are not animal rights. And that explains why we have so many arguments and infightings, because we still think that they belong to our group, and we don't realize there is people from another group coming closer to us, and we cross-talk because they have a slightly different point of view. But we operate in the same things. It's not that has merged. It's still people having both philosophy, because you can have somebody doing an animal rights outreach during the week, and then in the weekend doing an veganism outreach during the week, and then in the weekend doing an animal rights liberation thing. You can actually have different hats. Today I'm the animal rights person. Today I'm the vegan person, and operate like that. Because people might do this, and they might just be in the same places, but act slightly different, depends which hat they have. But that synergy of the two make more attractive the people joining one or the other. So, who are the yellow people? Who are the people that are animal rights but not vegan? Well, there could be a single issue. People that still haven't become vegan, and they only do anti-bullfighting, for instance, they haven't become that. Could be misanthropes, people that still think that humans are exceptional. Remember, Margaret Camus said, humans are like everyone else. But some people didn't buy that, and they still think, no, humans are horrible. So supremacists say humans are superior. Misanthropists, humans are inferior or evil. Well, either are wrong, is humans are just another species, we just do what we do. Or could be people that they haven't got the ahimsa thing going on, they still think that violence is okay. So if you still harming others is okay, you just select which ones. Or you are speciesist, you only do animal rights for some species and others you don't care. All that puts you in the yellow bit, you haven't achieved the whole thing. Who are the blue ones? The blue ones, well, I use this metaphor of the vegan mansion. I say veganism is like a big mansion, huge, everybody can live in it. But there are 5 doors, and there are different styles, and you might be attracted to one door or another, and they will have the spiritual gateway. That's the first one that was open in the mansion, remember the history. Then we have the health gateway, we have the animal rights gateway, the environmental gateway, and the social justice gateway, which is the last one open. But once you cross the threshold, you're in the same room, and then you can explore the whole mansion, so it's just a way to get in. But of course, when you have situations in the blue, it's people that just went in by the environmental one, for instance, or the health one, but they haven't explored the mansion yet. They haven't looked into the animal rights side. I entered the mansion through the animal rights side, so I immediately went to the green bits. But those that they haven't, they might still be in the vestibule, sometimes taking too long in the vestibule, but because it's not encouraging in. But once you explore, it's all free, once you don't have to pay to use any rooms, then you will explore. Like me, I haven't been vegan for so long, I have embraced all the 5 dimensions now. So essentially, there are advantages for joining together. This is a good thing. The fact that we got these two together, that helped. Why? Because it helped us to get the bigger picture, to be more coherent. Veganism gained from this, because gain the rights element, the legal element. At the beginning, was just converting one individual at a time just for me. And then, because the animal rights people were all about changing the law, that was incorporated into the vegan thing. Veganism also got more radical and got the activists. Before, they were not vegan activists, just people talking about veganism. The vegan activists come because of the animal rights influence. Animal rights also became more realistic. At the beginning, it was very symbolic and difficult to achieve. With incorporation of veganism, you could actually do changes every day in your life. Become palpable to do things like that. Become less fringe and more mainstream, so gain people. Both gain demographic diversity, people that otherwise would not join them would join them. Also gain followers, a group. And they look at the issue with the best perspective. Because remember, at the beginning, the whole picture, that deer thing, you look at all the images in the same. And if you just look at one, you miss the other. But by joining both, you look at both at the same time. You understand the issue better. So essentially, I think they're still different movements, but they're overlapping so much. They are reinforcing each other, completely reinforcing. That makes total sense to adopt them both. It's not that we created a new movement, a merged that loses the identity of both. No, we maintain the identity of both. We can have as many identities as we want. We don't have to choose one. But these ones are reinforcing each other. So basically, if you have the looking at the picture of the deer and looking at the picture of the human, the best way to look at it is that way, sideways, when we have equal amount of attention and understanding of both sides. And then is when we can solve the problems. And then is when we can prevent arguments and debates that are useless because we thought we're telling somebody, you're not vegan enough or you're not animal rights. And we thought we're talking about people belonging to the same group. We didn't realize there were people that coming to join us. So rather than push them away, saying you're not one of us, said, oh, please come in. So we need to get the blue people into the green and the yellow people into the green. So we all green animal rights, vegans or vegans, animal rights. Thanks very much. That's it.
I don't get this now. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jordi. Let's see if we have some questions. I see Martin here in the back.
There is quite a few points where I disagree with you. Maybe we can speak about afterwards. My view, an animal rights person who takes animal rights seriously must be vegan, but not the other way around. And you seem to think opposite. I could give you a number of examples. For example, our campaign to get the personhood of chimps in order to sue the government so that they provide money that the chimp can own and pay for his own living. Is that a vegan thing that vegans would demand? If I speak about that, or they would say, this is just not at all our issue. Would a vegan campaign look for the personhood of a chimp? So I think I consider myself an animal rights activist, and I don't consider myself as a vegan activist, although I have been vegan for 40 years. And I think this is an implicit thing that is obviously the thing to do. But I consider myself a political campaigner for political change and for the liberation of animals of human suppression. And I feel that that's sort of a very different approach.
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad that you show your views because, you see, it's true. There are animal rights people that don't consider themselves vegans, you just say, which is, as I understand, is true. But that you talk like an animal rights person and you use the animal rights argument and not the vegan right argument, and that makes total sense to me. Anything you said makes total sense to me from only the animal rights person. Both. So you can have one, you mentioned them vegans, but the way you mention vegans, you probably mentioned the vegans in the yellow, the ones that are not animal rights person. But what if you're both? That's what my point is. If you're both animal rights and vegan, and you hold both philosophies at the same time, they are not incompatible with each other. There's nothing one says that goes against each other. So you can put your hat on and say, I'm going to talk as an animal rights person, and what you just said fits perfectly well, but you could change the hat and put your vegan hat on and say, and also I'm not going to consume animal products, and also I want to change the world, I want to create the vegan world. You can have both. Now, so if people don't want vegans become animal rights, that's their prerogative. But I think it would help if all vegan people become animal rights, and it will help if all animal people become vegan.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add? Yes, Sebastian, go ahead.
My name is cool. Hi, I'm Sebastian from Germany. I wonder, like, animal rights and veganism. Would you say that veganism is more about reducing suffering, animal rights is more about giving animal rights?
No, I don't think reducing suffering is veganism. This is animal welfare. So, veganism is about harm. As ahimsa is not about suffering, it's about harm. You can kill an animal in a way that doesn't suffer at all, but you're harming the animal. So the harming is the problem. You can harm by exploiting, you can harm by killing, you can harm. So the harm is an action of the person harming towards another. The suffering could happen without an action. Somebody might suffer without somebody causing that suffering. So they're different concepts. But animal welfare is all about the suffering thing. Animal welfare is all about analyzing how much suffering there is, finding ways to reduce it, pretending that you're reducing it, you haven't reduced it, creating reforms that they don't reduce it, they just change the name and the form. That's why animal rights and animal welfare are not the same thing. So these are, in this scene here, there are other entities outside. Animal welfare is outside. Plant-based people are outside as well. And they are all pushing us to split. The animal welfare people, they don't want us to be vegan, so they're pushing the animal rights people towards them. The plant-based people, they don't want us to become animal rights, they push us towards. So there are forces that push us apart, and the external forces, there are forces internal that also push us apart, the ones that are here, they want to push the green bits over there. So all these forces explains all the conflicts we have and the infighting we have. But when you understand where everybody comes from, so okay, you're an animal welfare person. Okay, you're a plant-based person. Then you understand what you're doing. And it's best, rather than fight, just to see whether we can get everyone in from here, everyone there inside the green bit. Because if we do get everyone in the green bit, we get the vegan wall and we get animal liberation.
Yes, I have another one here.
Oh, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question. I have to explain a bit the context of my question. I work as a plant-based health coach, so I'm really glad a plant-based health coach, vegan health. I'm vegan, and yeah. But I love the image that you showed of the palace or the. And I've noticed that, I've noticed that in my work as well. I'll give an example. Somebody I coached last year, she started off really for health reasons to eat plant-based food, like to really avoid pain. She had intestinal pain. But in the process, so she entered this building, right, through the health doorway, but in the process became vegan, really opening her heart to animals, and she had quite a transformation. So I really recognize this, and I see it in practice. And my question is, I was just wondering, I'm starting to notice that there seem to be certain moments or transformational parts in people's lives where they're more likely to enter into different doors. And I was curious what your perspective is on that. Do you notice certain patterns happening? For example, when I became a mother, that was a catalyst that caused me to become vegan. So I'm wondering if there are certain moments that you've noticed in people's lives, certain patterns you're seeing, and what those might be.
There's the door attraction, which is what I'm talking to, how attractive each door is to the people and what makes them want to choose that one or the other. It varies per time, per place, per culture, per geography. The only door that existed available at the beginning was the spiritual door. So they all kind of open at different times. I wrote an article. If you Google the Google Mansion, you might see my article. In a metaphorical, fictitious way, I explain how I think the order of doors were created. But there are moments of time. And now, for instance, environmental door is big. A lot of people join in through the environmental door. The social justice door is smaller now, but it's just started. I'm just going to show you the image. So, because it's a more linked to human rights in a way, in many respects. But I predict it's going to grow, because that is going to give you a lot of new perspectives. But psychologically, why you want to choose or not, is really idiosyncratic. It depends on each individual person. But often it's a fashion thing. You see somebody using that door, then you join that queue. So you approach the whole thing from here. You say, "What the hell is this?" And he said, "Oh, interesting mansion." And then somebody comes to you. It's free. You can live there. It's all free. Food is amazing. You can go. And then you just see several queues. And the one might be, "Oh, I'm going to join this one." It really doesn't matter, because once you're in, that's it. You're in. It's not that when you choose a door, you have to only use a particular part of the mansion. And that's my point of doing this. So we get obsessed about the gateway, but the gateway is just the gateway. The mansion has loads of rooms, and you attach to it. So I'm attached to the animal rights gateway because that's the one I first used. I like the decoration more, I like more the style. But I embrace them all now because I've been vegan for a long time. So time is important. So if you just join, you might only have in your mind that gateway, but give yourself time and give others time. Don't push someone that is just in the door. Give them time, be welcoming. Use, like the mention is go. And sometimes take so much. Now it's true there is some weird people that enters and sits at the door and don't go anywhere. And then just sit there and they spend their life at the hall, at the vestibule, only in that door. I don't understand why they do that. It's all free, but it's up to them. So.
Thank you. We have one last question we have time for.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I think I have a little bit trouble to understand the blue zone. Can you give some more examples about that? How
This is the blue zone. So an example of people in the blue zone, which means a vegan that hasn't really become an animal welfare, animal rights person, is somebody, for instance, that entered through the environmental gateway and didn't advance. They say, I only vegan for the environment, I don't care about animal rights. Oh, you're in the blue, you haven't been to the ring yet. Or a health person, that the example mentioned before. Somebody said, I like veganism, I'm gonna not exploit any animals for health reasons, but that's kind of just insufficient. If somebody just entered through the health reasons, stay in the blue, and doesn't move anywhere, stay in the blue, give it time, that person then will go to the green. So that's the idea. So it's often people that just began the vegan, joined the vegan mansion anyway, just began the vegan process, or people that has been doing for quite some time, but there is some block in their mind that makes them not to want to be an animal rights person at all. That might be because they've been seduced by the animal welfare people that say, oh, it's easy if you follow us, because we don't demand any change in behavior. You can do whatever you want. And so there is forces, external forces, that push the other way, that they say, don't go further, don't go to the animal rights, stay at the door because these people are too clever and they're gonna take control of the world. And it's all our job to fight these internal and external forces and not push people away so we have a big mansion with only 10 people living in it. You just say, come in, it's all free. So.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you for your comments and questions as well.